want to, show you how to preserve your food so you don't have to give it away or it doesn't rot out there in your yard. So whether you freeze, can, or dehydrate, you'll certainly get the gist of it here. And then at the end, I'm going to show you a website. The sometimes this stuff can be tricky, meaning you can get sick if you don't do it properly, but please don't be afraid to do it. And there are guidelines. I'm just going to go over a high-level overview, but there are guidelines in certain timings that you should be aware of before you proceed. Okay, so in this presentation, and for those of you who are new to these presentations, if you would please put any questions or comments in the chat, and we'll probably have a logical break somewhere in this presentation. We may go over a couple, and then we'll answer any other questions at the end of the presentation. I do want to go over it and get it, the vast majority of the information disseminated before 8, so that people who had to, have something else to do can log off if they wish to. So freezing, we're going to go over freezing your fruits and veggies. Blanching, we're going to go over freezing equipment that you need in order to freeze your food. Everyone obviously has a freezer, but there are ways that you can freeze in order that your food lasts longer and is tastier. Canning, we'll look at water bath canning. We'll look about pressure canning. We're also going to look at safety procedures around those, because those can be, like I say, a little tricky. Then we're going to look at dehydrating, equipment that we use in dehydrating, and a variety of techniques that we use for dehydrating our food. So the first one we're going to look at, the first food preservation method, is freezing. And just a few terms you may hear. Blanching. What is blanching? Blanching is done to clean the food, release some flavor, and preserve the color of the fruit or vegetable in preparation for freezing. Blanching is a cooking process where the food, a fruit or vegetable, is plunged into boiling water or steaming water for a brief time, 2 or 3 minutes, and then it's removed, and then it's dunked right into ice water for about the same amount of time, so that the any kind of cooking process is completely halted. So it's boiling for a couple of minutes and then stopping it by dumping it in ice water. I have a video to show you, and that's going to help keep, believe it or not, it's going to make the food much brighter colored. It's going to hold in a lot of the nutrition and the vitamins in the food as well. We're also going to look at some foods that don't really do all that well when they're frozen. They change because of the high water content, they change the texture. So you're not going to have the same amount of crunch. Also, in FYI, when you're freezing, understand that, when you're doing fruits or veggies, they will last about 3 months. They're not going to last forever. They'll last about 3 months. But if you use a vacuum sealer, and I'll show you what those, I have one. It's a food saver. It's awesome. They're a little pricey, but it's pretty awesome. And it's, believe me, it's, I've had it for probably 2 or 3 years, this one, and it's already matched the return on the investment that I spent, which is probably, I don't know, probably about $150. So, and also, how long and if you use a good sealer bag too, you'll see that there's good sealer bags you can use. Obviously, if you see the ice crystals, because water is the enemy of freezing, and water and air. If you see ice crystals, you know that the food in the freezer is probably not fresh. Also, if you squeezed all the air out of the bag using using one of those machines, and you see that there's air that is, kind of, that the seal wasn't completely tight, and you see that you see some air in that bag, it's probably not as fresh as it should be either. So let's talk about how to do it. Okay, so you don't need, oops, excuse me, you don't need a lot of money to freeze your food. But if you do, like we'll go over it. Let's talk about it here. So you can use a freezer bag. Remember to use a freezer bag, not just a Ziploc bag. The freezer bags are thicker, and a lot of times they have double seals on the top. So, and they're better suited for freezing. And you can use a straw. And what you use the straw for is you use the straw to suck all the extra air out of the bag. The pro is that it's cheap as anything. Oh, if you can find straws nowadays, right? I guess they're very bad for the environment, but you can get a paper one too, same thing. And another pro is you can close and open the freezer bag, take some out out of the freezer, and you can reclose them. The con is that they don't really have that long a shelf life, because you can't really create a great seal with one of those. The next method is the handheld vacuum sealer method. I don't know if they're 20 bucks or they have some with batteries in them and some that you plug in. Fairly inexpensive. You can open it, reclose those. And the con is that you have a fixed bag size. You can either buy the quart or the gallon or what have you. And the way it works is you see this little machine, the little red machine. You see this little round piece down the bottom. That round piece sits on top of the bag. There's a little round circle on the bag, and it sucks all the air out, but it doesn't let any air go back in when you release it. So that's how those work. I've had those as well. Right here, you do have your table vacuum sealer, and that's the one I have. You can make your own bags using this method. You can also buy bags that have the same sealing process as the handheld vacuum sealer, because you can see on the side, this little unit is actually a handheld, I mean, not a handheld, but it's the same type of a vacuum sealer that's corded to the major the unit itself. The food lasts a very long time. You can make any size bags you want. So that means if you have every ham, every Easter, my son gets Christmas, excuse me, my son gets a big ham from his work, and he brings over the ham, and I always freeze that big old ham bone to make pea soup out of, and I freeze it in one of those, so you can really make a good sized bag. And like I say, the con is the fact that it costs, they cost over $100. You can get a cheaper one, but it's worth the investment, like I say. So freezing, when there are vegetables out there and fruit. Well, let's talk about vegetables first that are really nothing but water, right? Celery, cucumbers, lettuce, they're nothing but water. So when you suck all the water out, they're fairly crunchy, and then if you reconstitute it, it's going to be very soggy. Potatoes get mealy, radishes get mealy, and obviously the salad greens and the sprouts, they're nothing but water. So anyway, your vegetables won't be really very tasty, these particular vegetables, if you freeze them. So, and you're better off dehydrating them, and we'll get to that in another part of the presentation. Also, fruit. You can freeze fruit. You can freeze apples, really grapefruit, grapes, lemons, limes. You can freeze oranges, but they say not. And you can freeze the citrus zest as well. Watermelon, you can freeze. All of this you can freeze, but it changes it to a much different texture. So if you want to have a cookout and you want to have nice, watermelon and serve it, you certainly wouldn't dehydrate it first, because it's not going to taste the same. But what you can do for a frozen watermelon or a frozen orange or any kind of citrus is you can certainly put those in a cocktail or what have you, and add some flavor, or you can serve them frozen. So, but the texture is completely different. even apples, you know, a nice crispy apple, when you freeze it, it won't be so crispy anymore, but you can certainly make it in an apple pie the same way you would make, you know, use your fresh apples. But it does change the consistency of the fruit. So let me show you this presentation here on freezing. So hopefully you'll enjoy it.
Robin. Today we're going to be freezing summer squash. First, I've already washed the squash, so we're going to slice it now. Cut that piece off, and I like to slice them, and then I cut them in half. Already did quite a bit over here, and there's lots to go. So you just slice them, and I cut them in half also. Now we're going to blanch them. The water's all boiling and ready.
It's just an FYI on this. She's going to use the steam method. She has a beautiful steamer basket. Some people dip them into boiling water, but it's basically the same thing. It's high heat, so.
So I'm just going to add some in here. Into the steamer basket. And as you can see, I have yellow and green squash. I just mix them. So I'm going to cover it, and I'm going to blanch this for about 3 minutes. Okay, the 3 minutes is up. It's finished blanching. So now I'm going to take it and just take the basket out. And I already have my ice water all cooled and with ice in it, all ready to cool it down. So let's add it to the ice water. Put it under the water, and then we're going to let this sit for 3 minutes also to cool down.
So that is the blanching process, as I stated. Hot water, either boiling or steaming, and then dunk it into ice water for the same amount of time.
Okay, 3 minutes is up. So now, squash is all cooled down, so I'll just strain it out. Come on, fall nicely in the strainer. Here we go. Just give it a little shake. Now I'm just going to dry it off slightly on the paper towels. So I'm just going to dry it off.
As you can see, she's going to get every last drop of water that she can from the squash, or it's going to get ice crystals. It'll be no good. That's what she's doing. You'll see she gives it quite a massage there on the table. So.
Now that they're dried slightly, I'm going to add them into the Ziploc bags, and I dated zucchini 2011. So I just add what I would be using. That looks about enough. For meal for two. I'm squeezing as much of the air out as I can.
See, if I were her, I would use the straw method, but that's okay. I didn't tell her that yet, so.
There we go. These are ready to freeze. And as you can see, I have much more to do. I will show you in a future episode how I cook with these.
There we go. So we don't want to stay and wait for her to continue to process all her summer squash. Those, I think that lady's from Canada. Those are both green and yellow zucchini. And I like the yellow better. I know the green tastes a little bit, I don't know, a little bit of a stronger taste, but I like the yellow zucchini. I like it better than the yellow crooked neck or straight neck. So that is the section on the freezing. So we'll do a section, we'll do the canning, and then we'll take any questions anybody has, okay? And then we'll continue on with the dehydrating. So let's talk about canning. Everybody's scared to death of canning, okay? Because they're afraid they're going to get food poisoning or botulism. That certainly doesn't have to happen, okay? So let's talk about, first of all, I've gotten a lot of discussions with several people that have been canning for decades. I mean, I'm talking about older retired people that have been canning, you know, their grandmothers taught them 100, you know, and their grandmothers were doing it, you know, back in the 1800s or what have you. So the methods I'm going to show you are the ones that are approved by the USDA, the safest methods. And the products that I'm going to show you to use are the ones that are commonly used today. And we'll go over that when I'll get into a little bit more in depth. Okay, so let's talk about what kind of stuff we typically can. And when I'm talking about canning, I'm talking about using those mason jars and putting food in it. Okay, as far as fruit and vegetables goes, the water bath canning, what is a water bath? Okay, a water bath canner is a big old pot. It doesn't have to have anything special as far as pressurizing equipment on it. And I use an old lobster pot. It works just fine for me. And what do I put in a pressure canner? I mean, in a water bath canner, excuse me. I water bath can tomatoes, tomato sauce, spaghetti sauce, plain, or with herbs. I do not water bath can spaghetti sauce with big chunks of tomatoes, big chunks of onion, big chunks of garlic or zucchini. And I'll go over that. So pickled vegetable relish, fruits, jams, jelly, and whole fruits. The reason that we can circumvent the pressure canning process because these are high acid foods and they can preserve more easily. You can always use a pressure canner for everything, but you don't have to pressure can these particular goods. And the reason I say that you can do spaghetti sauce that's plain or with herbs, or maybe a little bit of chopped up onion or something, but not big chunks, is because although tomatoes are a high acid fruit, peppers aren't, onions aren't, garlic isn't, zucchini isn't, summer squash isn't. So although jalapenos, if you're making a basic chili recipe, beans that you put in tomato sauce, to make a chili recipe. So so those are so it's basically plain tomato, fruits, and pickled vegetables, because the vinegar that's used in the pickles is very highly acidic. So those would be, you do have to process them though. You do have, and I'll show you, I have a video on that as well. So what do you need the pressure, and I have I have an old lobster pot. I also have a pressure canner. I have one, and pressure canner is not a pressure cooker. A pressure canner is especially made to can low acid foods, and pressure develops inside it. I think they cost maybe $50, $60, maybe a little bit more for the big ones. But it is different than the water bath. You can water bath can in a pressure canner, but you can't pressure can in a water bath canner. So what do you use a pressure canner for? You use it for chili con carne, chili with meat. Yes, you can pressure can something with meat. So if you're growing your tomatoes and you're growing your cilantro and you're growing your black beans and your jalapenos and all that, you can add the beef or what have you and make your own chili and can it in your mason jars. You can also can anything that's not pickled. I don't like pickled beets. I love beets, but I don't like them pickled. I don't like them with the vinegar in them. So if I'm going to can beans, beets, carrots, I will use a pressure canner. They're not high acid foods. And also, as I had stated, your spaghetti sauce, tomato sauce, if you're going to use big chunks of pepper, onion, and garlic or what have you, you would err on the side of caution and do pressure canning on those as well. So, and as I say, I do have a video. I do have a link. It's in this presentation, but I'm going to go into it before we end this presentation, and just to show you how to use it. Okay. So, all right. Okay. All right. Canning. It's important to know that I'm guilty about using stuff sometimes when it goes over its supposed expiration date. So home canned goods stay fresh for a year. Maybe you can stretch that a bit, but maybe not. So to err on the side of caution, I have to say that home canned goods stay fresh for a year or two, maybe two, as opposed to when you buy canned goods in a store. My goodness, I mean, they have huge equipment. They're made in these, huge processing plants that are very efficient, and you'll see cans that last, that the expiration date is 2 to 5 years. And sometimes people use their own home canned goods for longer than that, but that's what the experts say. So canned goods are, so the whole thing is, if you're going to can some spaghetti sauce, right, and you can can it, when do you get your mother load of tomatoes, probably in August or what have you. So by the time that year rolls around, it's August again, and you have more tomatoes to can. So it's seasonal, and it works out just fine. So, and also when you can, it's a good idea to, at the end, to take a marker, a Sharpie, and put the date on the cans. So, and here's what modern canners use. Okay, I see, every once in a while, I see on a yard sale, um, old-fashioned canning stuff where you have a rubber, piece of rubber, and then you have this wire that goes up, and some people can't, used to use these old-fashioned jars, and when they made jams and they'd melt wax on the top and they wouldn't process them. None of that holds true anymore. This is the equipment basically that you use, the mason jars you use. There are several varieties, but strangely enough, Ball, I believe that's the brand name in the US, but there's several of them that are made in different countries and they all have different names, but it's all basically the same company. There are some that you'll see around that have they have reusable lids, um, but but for the most part, these here, once this is a 3-part jar. You'll see I have a video on it. This is a 3-part jar. There's the glass part, there's the lid part, which looks like a little flying saucer, like a real thin little frisbee. And then there's that's the seal, and then there's the rim that goes around it. So it's actually 3 parts. The top 2 parts, I do not use them more than once because there can be some kind of leakage due to the fact that they're canned. There can be some kind of leakage. I do use them again. I'll use them for leftovers to throw in the fridge, but I will not use them for canning again. And I will mark them as such so that I won't make the mistake of using them twice for canning. Okay, here's a kit that you can buy. Everything comes nicely in a kit. There's a magnet and a couple of pairs of tongs to use. And this is a nice little funnel so you won't make a mess like I always do. So, and here is a picture of a pressure canner. So that's the equipment that you use. Like I say, your mileage may vary. I was in these jars here, these mason jars are made especially for the heat. So if you use, you're more than welcome. I mean, people use old mayonnaise. I had this one woman, older woman, and she was just yelling that she, wanted to use her old ancient mayonnaise jars. But those jars can actually, crack in the water. So these jars are meant to take the heat. So they're not impervious. You drop one, it's going to break, but they're a lot tougher than the average glass. So that's what I use. So. And here is a video of a lady that's doing some simple water bath canning of some tomatoes. And I have a couple of comments after this presentation, but I do want to show it to you. So here it is.
Hi, I'm Kathy Gunst, resident chef for Here and Now, and it is harvest time. September means harvest. The gardens are overflowing, the CSAs are full of gorgeous fruits and vegetables, the farmers markets are just overflowing with local food. And now's the time to capture all the flavors of summer so that you can can them and freeze them and keep them all winter long. And then in February, when it's dismal and freezing cold, you can open a jar of homemade tomato sauce and relive all the pleasures of summer. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to demystify canning. We're going to try to bring it down, just a few simple steps, and show you how really simple it is. Every September, without fail, I make up a huge batch of tomato sauce. So I have all these beautiful heirloom varieties of tomatoes that I grew. I have my own garlic, my own onions, and a whole collection of herbs straight from the garden. These are all going to get chopped up into a sauce that I roast. And what happens is that the high heat of the oven just breaks down the tomatoes and you have like instant roasted sauce, and it's slightly caramelized and smoky. It's fantastic. One of the big myths about canning is that it's super complicated and you need a lot of special equipment, and none of that is true. Here's what you need. You need a big pot. This is my canning pot. It's just a big, huge pot filled with boiling water. This is the insert that comes with it. It's going to hold our jars. We're going to put this in later. We have clean canning jars. You can reuse them from year to year, but you need brand new lids and seals every year in order to make a tight seal. And we're going to talk about that in a little while. The really important thing with canning is that everything be sterilized and clean. You don't want any bacteria. So we take our jars and we put them right into the boiling water. You don't have to worry about the jars cracking or breaking because they're made to take high temperature. I got some smaller jelly jars here. Now these are the lids and the screw-on tops, and as I said, you need brand new ones every year. You don't have to buy new jars every year. You can reuse them. And the lids need to be sterilized as well, so we're going to pop those right in here. Cover them up, let them boil for 3 to 5 minutes also. Just leave it alone and let it sterilize. Jars have been boiling for 5 minutes. You'll see I have a pair of long tongs, and they have nice rubber on them, and so they stick. You don't drop things as easily. Just want to take the lids out. You don't want to touch anything. Once it's been sterilized, you'll have to touch the lids later, but you just want to let them dry off. And we're going to pick up the jars and drain them. You want to be really careful. This is really hot boiling water. And we'll just line them up and let them dry. So these are super sterilized. They've been through the dishwasher and now they've been in boiling hot water. Something to always keep in mind when you're canning is you don't want to be putting cold sauce or jams into hot jars. You want the sauce to be warm. So we're going to just put that in. You never want to fill it all the way, 3/4, because it's going to go back into the heat and it's going to expand. Let's give that a little juice. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take our towel and we're not going to touch the rim. We're just going to clean it off because we don't want any sauce there because that can create bacteria. Take a clean lid, put it in, put that on. Seal it up really tight. You see there's still some space there. Now we'll keep going.
Just a comment, the reason she doesn't fill it up to the top is because the sauce explodes. And if she was going to fill it up to the top, the sauce would have nowhere to go. So you could have, some glass breakage. So that's why she doesn't, depending upon what you're going to process, in the size of the jar, it has a different, what they call a head space. And that's the space between the top of the jar and the food itself. Sometimes for some stuff, it's a 1/2 inch. For some stuff, it's a 1/4 of an inch. I think that maybe a 1/2 inch or 3/4 of an inch for spaghetti sauce. But the site I'm going to send you to will specify that as well. So. And just one other thing, the fact that she's actually wiping off the lid on top so there's no food stuck in there is very important because you will have bacteria if that's not absolutely clean. So that's why she's doing it.
So we have our jars. They've been sterilized. They've been filled with the hot sauce. The lids are on. They're sterilized. The top's been screwed on. I'm just going to double check that. And we're ready to process them. Our water's boiling. Again, you want to be really, really careful. This is incredibly hot. I have my rack there. Just going to lower those onto the rack.
Oh, just to let you know also, that rack is a really nice feature, and you'll see it when she pulls them out, but you don't need that. Like I say, you can use an old lobster pot or any other big pot that you have, but it is a nice feature, so.
You can put one in the middle. That works out perfectly. And now we're going to gently lower them into the water. You want them to be completely submerged in the boiling water. We're going to cover it, and we're going to process them for 30 minutes. And we'll let them cool off. I'm going to lift them out. One of the really good signs that I see is that none of the lids are buckling. And what I mean is that sometimes when they haven't sealed properly, if there's air trapped there, they'll kind of look like a little wave and you'll see a buckle. We don't have any of that. We have that really nice hollow sound, and they all sound the same, and that's another good sign. I just want to show you, you don't have to worry about taking this off. This can come off, but this is where you're testing it. See that seal? We are good. So hopefully I've demystified the canning process for you. It's really simple. You just want to be super sterilized and super clean, and you won't have any problems. And you're going to have this gorgeous sauce, or whatever it is you choose to can, all winter long. So enjoy it. Don't be scared of it, and have fun. The other thing is invite some friends over, let them bring all the produce from their garden in CSA, and make yourself a canning party. Enjoy.
Okay. Ryan, does anybody have any questions?
Yes, we did have a question.
Okay.
Kathleen W. asked, is it best to use a pressure canner for homemade salsa?
A lot of people don't. The salsa in itself has, if it's, there's different types of salsa, but if it has a lot of vinegar in it, perhaps not, because vinegar is one of those things that drives up the acidity, or drives down the pH, as they say. But to be on the safe side, you can. A pressure can salsa, though, will be a little bit, won't be quite as chunky as the fresh one. So I think there's recipes out there for water bath salsa, because it does have the vinegar, or you can always default to a pressure canner. But I think there's recipes for both. So good question. I love salsa. Good stuff. Anything else, Ryan?
Nope, that was the only one so far.
Okay. All right. Very good. All right. So let's talk about dehydrating. Okay. So dehydrating is the process of removing the water from food so that the foods can be stored for, and this is basically the same as canning. They say that the food can be stored for a year. It's not that long, I guess, when you think about it. I think it can last for more than a year, but the nutrition won't be the same. In any case, when you do dehydrate something, just a heads up, right? You do retain some amount of the nutrition. You don't retain the vitamin C, though, if that's a concern for you. So if you eat a lot of dehydrated, because the vitamin C is gone when you do the dehydrating. So fruits, vegetables, herbs, and meat can all be dehydrated using a good quality dehydrator. Okay, once the food is dehydrated, you have to store it somewhere. So, and I'll tell you, pack it in something clean, insect-proof containers as tightly as possible. Get that air out. Air and moisture are enemies to your food. They will shorten the lifespan of your food. Store these dehydrated foods in clean. After you dehydrate it, right? You can store it right in the same canning mason jars as you would for canned goods, or you can store it in the freezer bags that you used for. I have, last year, oh my goodness gracious, I had the mother load of zucchini like you read about. So I don't realize how much I'm planning, or how great I cut down a bunch of trees and got a bunch more sun. So I think I probably got more than I could give away. And I dehydrate them. Basically, I dehydrate them and give them to my dogs for treats. They absolutely love them. But I did dehydrate some chopped zucchini. I put it in my food chopper to make zucchini bread. And I took two, and then I put them in my dehydrator, but on top of a parchment paper, or you can have liners for the bottom of your trays. But 2 cups, and I separated them into 2-cup portions because 2 cups are the amount of zucchini that you use for a loaf of zucchini bread. And I dehydrated them already chopped. And then I put each 2-cup portion in a freezer bag that I use for my food saver. And I think the 2 cups of zucchini, when it was dehydrated, it went right down to probably, I'd say, 1/3 of a cup or maybe a 1/2 a cup. So when I go to use that zucchini, what I can do is, if I was going to use it in a soup or a stew, I would just put it in there. And of course, because it had the liquid in it, it would automatically puff back up. But if I'm going to use it for a cake or zucchini bread, what I would do is put it on the counter, add some water to it, and wait 10 or 15 minutes, and it will hydrate again. And then you can use it in the zucchini bread. It will taste pretty much the same. It's not quite as crispy originally, but of course you don't want it to be because you're putting it in a zucchini bread. So in any case, also, it's the same as any food. You can rehydrate the food by adding liquid back into them. And you can do that, as I say, if it's something that you want to have as a side dish or what have you, you can put a bowl on the counter and add some warm water to it, 10 to 15 minutes, and it will puff back up. But you've seen people, I know, going to church craft fairs and all that. You see people that take the mason jars and put a layer of dehydrated carrot, a layer of dehydrated celery, a layer of dehydrated onion, and then some noodle, and then some freeze-dried chicken. And they make their own little soups, and they put some bouillon in there, and it's like a layered design in the mason jar. So people do that as well. So but of course, if you're gonna cook something, you just throw it all in the soup in the soup, and it'll be just as good. So just a heads up about dehydrating. Okay, dehydrating removes about 95% of the water from your food. Dehydrated foods, as I stated, are good for at least a year. They may, like I say, they may lose some flavor after that, but as long as as long as it's kept in a place and airtight, it should be good, maybe for a little bit longer. That your mileage may vary. And some people are more cautious about that than others. Also, I just want to differentiate between dehydrating and freeze drying. Okay, freeze drying removes 98% of the water from food. If you're and I have a lot of friends that are, and I don't know if any of them are on this call, but if you are, hello, you have my respect. But the prepper community, may invest. Those are the people that may invest in a freeze drying unit. They cost a couple of $1,000s, so you really have to do that with a lot of food in order to get a return on an investment like that. But your freeze dryers are expensive, but the food will last 25 to 30 years in one of those freeze dryers. But again, this is about dehydrating. But I wanted just to tell you the difference in case you're interested in the freeze drying. So let's talk about this a little bit. And pretty much you get what you pay for. Okay, you can I have a lot of herbs. Ryan knows I love my herbs, and I grow them. I dehydrate them, and I give them for Christmas gifts to my friends and family. And I haven't heard any bad reviews. I don't know if they actually use them or they re-gift them or whatever it is. I don't hear many complaints. So So dehydrating, if you have something that's similar, that's so simple, like an herb, all an herb is a little stem of with some little green, lovely aromatic leaves on it. So what you can do is you can tie those in bundles and you can just hang them. Um, and they'll dry just fine as long as your house isn't real dusty, which mine is. So I don't do that. So, but you can do that. It doesn't cost anything except the price that you pay for a roll of twine or string. It's easy peasy. The other method where you don't have to buy anything is you can use your oven. And but you have to use the very, very lowest temperature on your oven, under 200 degrees. And you have to leave the door open. I have a video on this as well to show you, just to try to, show you this technique. But typically what happens is if the oven is too hot a temperature, what happens is the outside gets cooked before the inside. And because the outside is dry, you think the inside is dry. Anyway, what you do is you trap the moisture in there, and the moisture, as you know, is an enemy to the dehydrated food, and you have a mold problem. So you can try doing some stuff with the with the oven if you want. But what I would do if I really wanted to do some dehydrating of some stuff, you can fit a whole bunch of dehydrated food in your cabinet. So, and another thing that's good about dehydrating, right, just like canning, is that if the power goes out, I still remember, I think it was maybe back in 2010 or something, it was quite a while ago, maybe before that, but there was an ice storm, and there's a good part of the city of Worcester was out in the winter with no power for quite a few days. And if that happens, your refrigerator, I mean, unless the weather is, like a freezer outside the whole time, you can lose your whole freezer. So, so dehydrating, you won't have to really worry about that. So, but what the best thing to do is for dehydrating is to get a dehydrator. I have one. Mine has several trays. It has different settings. The lowest setting, which is, I believe it's 90 degrees, is what you would use when you're dehydrating herbs. And it has different, different levels. I guess the highest setting is maybe for jerky or something, but it tells you, the different temperatures and basically what they're used for. Mine's an Excalibur, and that's one of the higher end. Mine is the cheapest Excalibur though, because you can really go overboard. I think it costs like $200. It's expensive, but you can get a smaller unit like this, and they cost probably around same price as a food saver or the vacuum sealer. They'll cost you over $100, but you can certainly save enough, by using one that you can get a return on that investment as well. So, and they last for years, several years. So, okay, so here's our presentation on dehydrating.
Drying, one of the oldest methods of food preservation, is gaining in popularity. One of the biggest advantages of drying or dehydrating food is that it removes the water that yeast and bacteria need to grow. If dried properly, foods will not spoil. There are various ways of drying foods, including the sun, conventional oven, or electric dehydrator. Because of high humidity, it is not recommended that we dry food.
Oh, just to let you know, this is the one I have. That's the Excalibur. Very distinctive shape.
Food outdoors in Missouri. Oven drying is probably the most convenient method because most people have an oven. It isn't, however, a very energy efficient way to dry foods. It's also difficult to maintain the low temperature needed for drying in a regular oven. Oven dried foods are more susceptible to scorching and tend to be darker, more brittle, and less flavorful than foods dried in a dehydrator. An electric dehydrator will give you the best, most consistent results. Although the initial investment for an electric dehydrator is fairly high, it does a better job of maintaining the low temperatures needed for drying. Drying removes the moisture from the food so that bacteria, yeast, and molds cannot grow and spoil the food. It also slows down the action of the enzymes but does not inactivate them. Because drying removes moisture, the food becomes smaller and lighter in weight. Some foods, such as jerky, fruit leathers, or dried fruits, can be eaten dry. Other foods, like vegetables, may have to have the water added back when ready for use. The optimum temperature for drying food is 140 degrees Fahrenheit. If higher temperatures are used, the food will cook instead of drying. When the food cooks on the outside and the moisture cannot escape, case hardening can occur. The food will eventually mold. Thus, the drying process should never be hurried by raising the drying temperature. Low humidity aids the drying process. Food contains a lot of water. To dry food, the water must move from the food to the surrounding air. If the surrounding air is humid, then drying will be slowed down.
3, 2.
Drying times will depend on the type and amount of food, the moisture content, as well as the room temperature and humidity. Some foods will take only a few hours, while others may require days of drying time. If you're going to attempt oven drying, start by using an oven thermometer to test the oven temperature at its lowest setting. If it cannot maintain a temperature below 200 degrees, then it's too hot for drying food and you'll need to choose another drying method. Place food in a single layer on a tray that is narrower than the inside of the oven. This will allow air circulation. Only use the bottom heating element, never the upper broiler element. Also, prop the door open at least 4 inches. For an electric dehydrator, different foods with similar drying times and temperatures can be dried together. If you're drying vegetables that have a strong odor like garlic, it's best to dry them separately. Determining when food is dry will take some experience. Err on the side of caution by over-drying rather than under-drying.
And that is our, oops. Okay. Now I'm going to take this link. Oops. I have to take this off of this display. I'm going to take this link and I'm going to copy it in. And I'm going to reshare my screen with you because I do want to walk you through this link. Okay. Oh, I can see everybody's. Hi, everyone. Okay, bear with me here. Okay. Okay, folks, this is the USDA website. And you'll get a copy of, when you get a copy of the presentation, it's on that last page. Okay, so what it can do is it will tell you the preparation for canning, freezing, and dehydrating. Actually curing and smoking, fermenting, pickling, make special one for jams and jellies, etc. But, so let's just figure out how to use this, okay? So let's do canning. What are we interested in? Let's do canning salsa, because someone asked about canning salsa. Okay. Oh, we don't want to do the Spanish because, okay. Oh, no, it's all in Spanish. Okay, let's do this one. Okay. So it tells you, let's see if this has. Okay. This says it's a hot pack. That's what boiled water canner. This is a water bath canner. So there is a recipe out there for canning salsa in a water bath canner. And it tells you it's a hot pack, which means you put hot food in the jars. You can use pint or half pint. You process it for 15 minutes. If you have high altitude, you have to process it for more time. So that's how to do your salsa. Or You can do, what is this, drying, how to dry your herbs, your jerky, your fruit leathers, the kids love those. I used to spend a fortune on those fruit roll-ups for my kids. Mango leather, how do I dry peanuts? Popcorn, my goodness, it's dry enough as it is to begin with. Pumpkin seeds, all that kind of stuff. So that's basically it for this. It tells you everything. So, and that's the way, this is, okay. And here's also general information on canning, high level processes and procedures that you can follow. So that's the website, and I do have that in the handout. So let's go back to the handout. Okay, do we have any other questions, Ryan? Oops.
Yep.
Okay.
April asks, how tight should you screw the lid on the mason jar before you put it in the water bath to process? I've heard different things about not screwing it too tight or too loose.
Just a medium. I mean, I would screw it on fairly decent. I've heard differences myself, but I don't think there's anything wrong with giving it a good screw and screw it on just hand tight. So when you water bath can. So that's what I would do with that. Any other questions?
That was our only one.
All right, very good. Okay, so as I said, this is my website, my email. If you have any questions, if you signed up via the link that the registration from the library, you will be getting this information. If you didn't, and you have any other questions, feel free to email me. And we'll see you soon. Thank you very much. Take care now.
Thanks for
Bye.
coming, everybody. Have a good night.